If students do not learn the way we teach, then we must teach the way they learn. This quote is by Ignacio Estrada, who is the Director for Grants Administration at the Gordon and Betty Foundation. As a group, we chose to introduce our podcast with this quote as we felt that it was very relevant with our title, Personality Differences in Education. What this quote explains is that not all students learn in the same way as each other, and as teachers, it is our duty to adapt our teaching styles so that each student understands what is being taught. In our podcast, we hope to investigate and critique the concept around this quote by considering: how is personality defined? Do personality differences need to be considered in our approach to teaching? Are personality differences and learning styles related? Does considering learning styles benefit teachers? We will then analyse the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator and discuss how the results are derived from combinations and utilised in education. Following this, we will investigate the three learning styles: visual learner, audio learner, and kinesthetic learner, also called the VAKs, and then examine our findings by critically analysing if learning styles and educational performance are actually related. We will then conclude our podcast with a brief recap on all the previous information we have discussed. The APA, American Psychological Association, defines personality as being the individual differences in characteristic patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. It is these individual differences, such as values, attitudes, social relationships, habits, and skills, that are affected by the development of the individual. What we want to discuss is how personalities might influence not only learning strategies but also learning outcomes. As teachers, it is essential to be aware of how our students learn if we are to engage in a practice of continual reflection, but we also need to be informed about the misinformation associated with this theory. We will now discuss the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator.
Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, also known as MBTI, is an introspective self-report questionnaire that is designed to highlight psychological preferences in how we perceive the world around us and how we make our decisions. MBTI was developed in 1946 by Americans Katharine Hook Briggs and Isabella Briggs Myers. They drew their inspiration from the work of Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, whose typology theory, which speculated that there are four principal psychological functions by which we people experience the world: sensation, intuition, feeling, and thinking. MBTI framework is broken down into four pairs: introvert versus extrovert, am I outwardly or inwardly focused? Sensing versus intuition, how do I prefer to take in information? Thinking versus feeling, how do I prefer to make decisions? Judging versus perceiving, how do I prefer to live my outer life? You pick one of each pair, which when combined in various ways can lead to 16 categories of personality type. While there are many layers to the classroom environment, one constant factor is personality. Weekly discussion sections can offer both an exhilarating opportunity for extroverts and an overwhelming experience for introverts. And although these two personality traits may seem at inherent odds, they need each other and can learn from each other.
It can be quite unavoidable to discuss personality differences in our classroom and not mention the recent theory that along with having a variety of personality traits, students now also may have a preferred learning style, and that teachers should consider these when planning their teaching strategies. The most popular theory being that of the VAK learning types. Theorist Walter Barb developed the VAK model. According to Burke, each learner has a sense through which he or she learns best. The VAK stands for the visual learning, auditory learning, and kinesthetic learning. Each learning style can occur independently or in combination, and they also change over time and can become integrated with age. So the visual learning style. Apparently, this style of person learns best through the sense of sight. Supposedly, some visual learners prefer words and others prefer visual representations such as charts, diagrams, and art. It has been reported that students remember information better and can recall it better when it is represented and learn both visually and verbally. It is said when students develop and use a graph organizer, their higher order thinking and critical thinking skills are enhanced. Another study stated students with and without learning disabilities improve achievement across content areas and grade levels. So the auditory learning style. According to Walter, an auditory learner is someone who absorbs knowledge most easily when it comes to their sense of hearing. They depend on hearing and speaking as a means of learning. The kinesthetic learning style. Here's a video of a clay demonstration. Kinesthetic learners are said to be the type of learner who learns best through activity. They want to touch, manipulate, experiment and draw. Touch is the main way they acquire knowledge. It is said that kinesthetic learners are best taught through strategies such as being given the opportunity to go on field trips and tours. They also learn best through teachers and lecturers who give real life examples of the topic.
When we researched this theory further, we found little scientific proof that the teaching strategies based on student-preferred learning styles and student educational performance are related. Do students have preferred learning styles? They may think they do, but there is scarce research affirming that visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning styles matter or even exist. If you make some people use their preferred learning type and show they learn more, that would be pretty conclusive proof of this so-called style, says Mark Connolly, an associate research scientist and principal investigator at the Wisconsin Center for Research. But there's no evidence of that. Insisting on a learning style can actually be a counterintuitive crutch for students, Connolly says. For example, if an instructor lectures off a piece of paper rather than a PowerPoint, a student might walk in and think, "I'm a visual learner," and use that as an excuse for poor attention or motivation. In reality, research shows that if all things are equal, the student will learn just as much from an auditory presentation as a visual one. The really important part is that clearly learners have differences, Connolly says. They have differences in their interests, abilities, personalities, and background knowledge. But all of those things aside, there's really no evidence that trying to teach someone's learning style leads them to learn better. To recap, in this podcast we have introduced and discussed personality differences in our classroom, how to identify them, and why it can be useful to be aware of them when attempting to enhance one's teaching and students' learning. Looked at Briggs-Myers personality indicator as a way to categorize student personality traits. Agreed it may be useful in some instances, though remain critical about how accurately one's personality can be appraised. Introduced the recent theory that students may have preferred learning styles, VAK being one most popular. Briefly described what all visual, audio, and kinesthetic learners are supposed to prefer according to this theory. We concluded that while it's beneficial for teachers to be aware of and take into consideration the constantly changing traits and attributes of their students, there is no evidence to prove that students can benefit from being taught in a way that adheres to their preferred learning style.